Welcome to CNBC-TV18's AI Roundtable. We're coming to you live from Davos 2025, and I have a packed house here with me, men in very spiffy suits who are going to tell us all about the magic of AI and how it's going to disrupt and transform the world. Well, great to have you gentlemen here with us. Jack, I'm going to start by getting to you first, and let's get the Trump question out of the way. Inauguration in a few hours from now, all eyes on what the executive actions President Trump is going to take on day one. A lot has been promised. What do you expect from the Trump administration, specifically in the context of technology and AI?
Well, Shreen, I just came from D.C., actually. That's where I was the last few days. A lot of activity there, meeting with some of the incoming administration, the cabinet officials. I would say this administration is going to be very lean in on technology. They're going to be using technology, looking for ways to be more productive, more efficient with technology, but also to think about it in imaginative ways. Thinking about it both in terms of the education sector, as an example, the defense sector, and boosting domestic production as well. So I think it's going to be a very big embrace of technology, both in the U.S., but also globally as well.
Well, Umesh, let me ask you, a big embrace, says Jack, and you've got Elon Musk there virtually at the helm of a lot of affairs. So what do you believe Trump 2.0 is going to mean for technology and AI?
Well, Shireen, what's interesting to me is what meets the eye is Elon Musk, and there's an appointment of an AI czar for the first time in Washington, D.C.
Yes, with an Indian connection.
But what misses people's eyes is I have never seen a huge contingent, the number of people from Silicon Valley, VCs, entrepreneurs, who've received calls in the coming weeks leading up to the inauguration to join the Doge transition team for AI, for crypto, for AI infrastructure. So clearly there's a huge focus. And I'll say with today's inauguration, just in a few hours from here, there are two things for me that are going to be very pivotal that are happening this week that are going to shape AI in the coming months. One is where we are in Davos. The conversation, all of us are feeling it. It's AI everywhere, etc. And this administration. I think it's not only going to be lean forward, it's going to be very pivotal, and it will have a major impact on the pace of AI, both for US as well as friends or foes of US. So it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Friends and foes of US, nicely framed there. Neeraj, any reports out on what this is going to mean, or reports out on what this is going to mean as far as the AI and tech world is concerned?
So I think there's a coming of age moment for AI, to my mind. As we talked about 1,500 CEOs across the world, I think there is a tale of two 75s, as I call it. 175 is 75% of CEOs want to lean in on AI.
Right.
But equally, 75% of CEOs are not seeing the ROI on AI. So there is, but I think that bridge will get, that divide, will get bridged in the coming, hopefully in the coming years, or it will get widened. So I think it's a very coming of age moment. I do see the ones which are leaning in on fewer use cases are actually getting the ROI. The ones which are leaning in beyond the technology on the people part of the equation are getting the ROI. So I think that's what we are seeing.
Well, that's what you're seeing. Chakri, let me ask you, and we were chatting and you said even last year the conversations were dominated by AI. It felt more like we were in the hype cycle. This time around it feels a little bit more real. What feels more real this year?
I think the progress in AI has been amazing, especially the last 3 months, the way it's grown in intelligence and reasoning. So we help plan the supply chains for the biggest companies in the world, and you asked about the Trump question. I think the uncertainties are at an all-time high. There's a lot of variables that companies have to plan for. Resilience is absolutely important. Flexibility is absolutely important. So I think the biggest benefit of AI I see is large companies can't pivot easily. There's a lot of complexity. Change is difficult. And I see Gen AI and, in fact, agentic AI being that missing force that makes complexity simplified. It's a great, it's early stages, but I see great promise in what's possible with that.
Well, yes, speaking of promise and potential, Akrit, it's great to have you join us here, and it's been an interesting transition for you as well, from a founder of a company called Haptic to now being an advisor to the government of India for the AI mission. Take us through where we find ourselves in the India journey on its AI path.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Shireen. India is at that classic point where we need a spark to kickstart the ecosystem. I would say that, to your earlier point about last year, there being a lot of hype globally, and this year, the fellow panelists saying there's been progress. I hope that we as a country get to the same place in the next 6 to 12 months. I think we are just about, like I said, putting the infrastructure in place, we're putting the compute capacity in place, we're putting the ecosystem in place for deep tech and research.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, as the going says that, India will be the AI use case capital of the world.
Yeah.
We have obviously a lot of people who need a lot of problems to be solved, particularly in core areas such as agriculture, education, healthcare. And more I'm realizing from the inside, even within the government, right? Even within governance, there are so many use cases that generative AI or AI can solve in general. So, from an India standpoint, still only getting started, lots to do. And the fun part is that it's never a dull day. By the time you wake up every morning, something's changed in Silicon Valley and we need to keep up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess that catch-up is underway. Jack, you wanted to make a point, but I like the way that Akrit framed it. India could possibly emerge as the largest AI use case.
Well, I think both for India and for the US and for the globe, we've heard a lot for the last 2 years with the explosion of ChatGPT about language AI. ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Meta Llama 3, all wonderful language AIs, and many use cases for that to cut costs. But what we're going to start hearing about this Davos in the next 24 months is quantitative AI. Not large language models, but also now complementary to that, large quantitative models. This is where you can make a new medicine for Alzheimer's, for dementia, for diabetes. In India, for example, many key diseases still have no great treatment. In the US as well, in other countries. This doesn't need ChatGPT, it needs is large quantitative models, AI that knows chemistry, AI that knows biology. This is the new wave of AI that we're going to start seeing, starting this Davos, but also the next 24 months.
Okay, so that's going to be the trend to watch out for, and Jack always does the trend spotting for us here in Davos. Umesh, let's talk about the point that Neeraj was making, the 75% that have bought in to AI on account of the fact that they see a return on investment, and the 75% that are holding back because they don't yet see a return on investment. Now, from your perspective, take me through how you're being able to sell this to clients and what you're actually seeing in terms of return on investments today.
So, a couple of observations. First of all, in the last 12 months, Unifor has seen an acceleration, and that's coming from the US and number 2, Europe. I will say from our lens, Asia is not where US or Europe is. And the difference
that's probably only because of spends, right?
Well, it spends and also the leaning forward of leaders. I think in US there's a clear understanding, whether it's a retail company, healthcare company, a big bank, or a telecom, that in each industry there's a club emerging in Wall Street. You're either a big adopter of AI, which means you're not just using it, but you're coming out in earnings and saying, here's what AI did in my business, and here's what impact it had on my earnings, and the stock is being rewarded for that. And then there are companies which are not being able to do it. So I see a speed and velocity being a big differentiator around the world, and the point that Akrit was making, India needs to catch up on that. The two things that are coming in the way across the board, and the CEOs who are absolutely on it are solving this with aggression, and others are still figuring out. First, people don't understand that AI, unlike software of the past, like CRM and others, isn't a silver bullet. You first need to get your data prepared inside your company before which you can make big use of AI. Otherwise, it's a cool POC and a great demo, but not real production. So that's one impediment that people haven't yet figured out. And the second is, even if you figured that out, AI is driving a huge change management. I'll give you an example to your viewers. We work with an airline. They used to take 6 days. 3 people had to approve a change in a pricing policy. 6 days. With AI agents now doing that work, they trained those agents on just that one task. 6 days have gone down to 2 minutes. 2 minutes. What does this mean for the people who were in the chain who had to approve? You have to now reskill them, reapply them. So there's a whole change management and organization shift that needs to happen, which I think is another friction point, which is in some cases allowing companies to move with speed, and we are seeing the benefits of that, and their spends with platforms like Unifor just go like a hockey stick, and yet others who are still figuring this out.
Well, Neeraj, let's talk about the spends and the spends that will be required to really be part of the AI ecosystem, to be part of the AI race, so to speak. And at this point in time, we've got anecdotes coming in. Umesh gave us one. Goldman Sachs CEO gave us one, saying an S1 filing is now being done by AI in minutes versus a 6-member team doing it over 2 weeks. This pilot to proof. How's that story playing out today? What are you hearing from clients?
So a couple of things. One, if I can make one observation on what Umesh said, we are, at least from my vantage point and our vantage point, what we're seeing is it varies by the quality of the leadership team you have actually the geographical divide is a lot lesser. So this time around, I feel Asian CEOs, particularly, if I can count for that, are embracing this technology as fast as some of the Western CEOs.
So that's not...
Yeah, so
that's a
at least,
different opinion there,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I certainly way ahead. The lag between what is happening in the West to what's happening in Asia actually is almost non-existent. In many cases, some of the best use cases are coming out depending on the nature of the leadership team, because they've gone through a wave of digital, and this time around nobody's wanting to lag behind. It genuinely depends on the quality of the leadership team and the starting point of the tech architecture. So that's point one. The way, at least I would like to phrase it, is you use AI in 3 buckets. What I call the deploy bucket, which is you basically your day-to-day repetitive tasks, your email, your whatever, your search, all of that gets simple, very easy, right? That's everybody's doing that. My kids do it for their homework, etc., etc. The reshape is where you take a target operating model of a institution and fundamentally reshape it. He gave an example of a reshape. There are many examples across many industries, but I think Jack touched about the invent story, which is about saying you can go where nobody has gone before. Akhil talked about we can solve problems in India which have not been solved before. Healthcare is a great example of that, but you can do that in language, you can do that in so many, in education, across industries, which I think is very exciting. So I put if I had to deploy resources, I would put 15 to 20% in deploy, about 40% in reshape, and about 40% in invent.
But are you seeing that happen, is the question? Or is it the first bucket that's getting a disproportionate amount of the capital?
So the 10-15% which are getting the best use cases or getting the best ROIs, they're doing one more thing. They're going after fewer use cases. So we saw a distinct difference. We went out of 6 use cases versus 3. The ROI with 3 use cases was a lot better than 6 use cases. So you don't want to spread too thin.
Right.
You want to go deep on fewer things. Then the ROI is a lot higher.
You know, speaking of about the complexities as well as adoption, and I was having a conversation with Kathy Lee of the World Economic Forum yesterday, and she said, you know, one of the mistakes of going from proof to scale is the fact that people try and see just putting this up as a top layer and not really reshaping the organization, so to speak. You know, what are some of the challenges that you believe we're going to encounter as we now start to scale at speed?
Yeah, so in terms of, you know, we are focused on what we think is one of the biggest value leakage areas in companies, solving the silos of decision making in large organizations, right? That's where the biggest value leakage is. And it's been a biggest change management problem. And there are use cases that are developing in domains. For example, forecasting has become touchless in a lot of our customers, where 80% of forecasts are now driven by the system. Humans don't have to touch it. It's increasing the accuracy of the forecast, driving the supply chain. You talked about data. There's a lot of, you know, business makes decisions today without perfect data. So how it has to be an AI use case where actually living with imperfect data to make decisions is a big use case. But now, what I see with agentic AI and generative AI and the reasoning of that going next level, I think you touched upon quantitative models. Supply chain is just full of quantitative models. You're forecasting demand. Literally across the supply chain, there's 1 billion decisions, atomic decisions being made across pricing, across forecasting, across supply chain, production, procurement. All these decisions need to be connected. Historically, they've all been done in silos because of scale. Now, the opportunity exists to bring them all into a big decision graph where you're able to make them intelligently, faster, synchronized, where all the silos can be just collapsed like never before possible. So change management is going to be a huge issue, but companies need to embrace it. The agentic technology I can see becoming really powerful at doing many complex tasks, like running complex scenarios, doing complex post games that today takes long times for organizations to do. So I think the future is going to evolve pretty rapidly, in my opinion.
Yes, and agentic AI is clearly the buzzword here in Davos 2025. I'm collecting all the buzzwords. That's one of them. But Akrit, since we're talking about agentic AI, let's also marry the disruptive and transformational power of this technology with what happens as far as jobs are concerned. There will, of course, be the need to upskill, reskill, and so on and so forth. But from an India perspective, as part of the government's AI mission, how do you approach this issue in terms of what it means for a young demographic?
I'd say it's one of the biggest priorities of the mission. The mission is divided into 7 pillars. Some of the ones are very obvious, like compute, foundation models, applications. But the one that actually we end up spending so much time is the skilling pillar. We believe that this time has come for as far as labor and skill goes to move from just job work to AI work. And that's going to involve so many things, right? Getting people trained to work as AI analysts more than just data analysts is going to be the one big difference. And there's a lot happening. I think what I can tell you is the good news is it's a very big priority top down across all of the government departments, whether it's India AI Mission or the Ministry of Skilling and Education. As far as we are concerned, we're building labs all over the country where people can come in and get skilled across various AI capabilities, includes to some degree programming as well. And it's one of those things where, again, straddling sides of being an entrepreneur, and now on this side, I feel government is best positioned to do, right? Because the incentives are best set up for us to make sure that we create this ecosystem where 500 million or 1 billion people can be upskilled.
Yeah, Jack, I'm going to get the mic across to you.
Yeah. I agree with my Neeraj and the fellow panelists that businesses are embracing AI in a big way. We've gone beyond just to check the box, now to the real use cases, and this year will be the proof of the pudding. But where we need more help to see is from the governments. I think it's a very good signal that the PM has asked Chakri to be his AI czar. In the US, they just appointed David Sachs in that similar position. These are good signals. Governments are lagging behind business right now. When we look at government's ability to use AI right now, be it the language side or the quantitative side, we're not seeing the embrace that we should be seeing to make more efficiency, for upskilling, for so many aspects. When we look, for example, at cybersecurity, one of the jobs and responsibilities of any government is to protect its people, to protect the nation. AI in the hands of hackers is the #1 dream tool of every hacker. It is the dream tool that allows you to hack into almost any system. We are not seeing government step up enough to use AI to counter this hacking AI. So this is an area I think of great improvement. I hope we see that discussion here in Davos this year.
Well, we certainly do hope that we see that discussion. It is one of the key global risks that the World Economic Forum has, well, not specifically disinformation, misinformation, kind of cybersecurity, of course, continues to be a threat. But Umesh, if I were to ask you, to forecast for us what the next 12 months will entail in terms of priorities for you, but also priorities for the ecosystem to ensure that we actually deliver scale at speed.
So a couple of points. Let's do rapid fire. First, like it was said, architectures of AI matter. AI is no longer a point solution. And we've been saying this for a couple of years. Companies are beginning to realize. So our priority is to get as many of our current customers and new ones on a company-wide architecture so that they're learning across different departments, different agents, etc.
To the point that Chakri was making as well.
Exactly, everyone's making the same point. So companies that are beginning to embrace this are beginning to see the multiplication and exponential effects of AI. The network effects are very big. Second, speaking of government, I think it's really important that governments around the world recognize that, including the US, that it won't be, in my opinion, 3, 5, 7 years out, that the countries that had the best infrastructure, chips, or AI models, which will end up winning. I think technology sees no boundary. It sees no, it will proliferate. What will be required, which we are beginning to see models emerge, especially in the Middle Eastern countries, is governments that will take a step forward and put out new societal frameworks. For example, if AI agents do proliferate, which I believe is going to happen in 2025, we're going to see a huge proliferation of AI agents, different tasks. It won't be just David Solomon or I giving you these examples next year. Everyone will be talking about what they did with AI agents.
So you believe AI agents will be the big theme
Absolutely.
through 2025?
But here's the implication. As these AI agents come in, there will be in the near term big job displacement. That means that AI companies and other companies that are adopting AI, they'll need new skills, new jobs. But there's going to be a big gap in the near term while that happens. And so what do you think about, wealth redistribution models, where the big corporations that are adopting AI, they'll get 20, 30, 40% increase in their EBITDA margins, free cash flow. But there's probably in the near term will be, labor and job losses. So that mismatch, governments need to step up and think about new models of wealth redistribution because of AI. So AI agents is what will dominate the news. Trump's policies, we're going to wait and watch.
What can the government do except tax more?
Well, think about it this way.
How do they get companies to redistribute wealth except by taxing more?
We need to go back to social security models that were put in place probably 5, 6, 7 decades ago, where none of automation or AI had proliferated in a big way. We are now going to live through this era, and it's going to move at a pace that nobody's expecting. I mean, we think that, oh, last year we were here, we're still talking about POCs. I think that we are at an inflection point that we meet here this time next year, and it's going to be very different. And so we don't have time to waste to think about it, whether it's the US, India, or any other country. And governments and leaders which are thinking through that, including CEOs. CEOs that work with us, they're not asking us anymore, Umesh, tell me which LLM should I use or which infrastructure. That's now commoditizing. There's lots of options, which is good news. They're asking me, how do I shape my organization? And something as basic as I'm going back to them and saying, put together a tiger team, a small but high-powered tiger team that reports to you, the CEO, that's able to drive this change in the company, because otherwise it's going to be too slow and you're going to be left behind. Same applies for governments as well. You need almost a mission mode where a handful of people are given the license to break walls and run through walls and deliver what needs to be delivered, including reskilling.
Yeah, well, you know, that's an important point that you make, and I think this is also something that I've picked up from the conversations that I'm having, that the companies that are proving to be more successful in adoption are the ones that haven't left this to the CTO. This is actually the CEO's mandate, and it is the top leadership that's taking this forward. But Neeraj, you know, let's talk about what it does for the larger economy, for the larger global economy, and we've got all kinds of forecasts and projections on the kind of productivity uplift that this will lead to. We've just done one in India as well with EY on what potentially could happen as far as productivity uplift is concerned. What do you see this unlocking for the global economy?
So just back on firstly the point that was made on the people. So we use this term called 10-20-70, which means 10 is the technology,
Trust
20 is the
consultants
algorithms.
to come up with this stuff.
But I think it's important. I'll tell you why it is important. I'll tell you why it is important, because the 10 and 20 get a lot of the attention. The 70 is the people. And I think a lot of the dialogue shifts to the 10 and 20. You please go for it. Go for it, because it's something which everybody needs to embrace. And the 70 is the people, and people have to unlearn and relearn. And oftentimes the difference between organizations do it well and not is the 70. And very little attention is paid to the 70, and that's why it cannot be left to the CTO only. It has to be a CEO's agenda.